Alrighty, welcome back to another thrilling installment of Mecha Mondays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Frageth, and this week we're going to be reading more of Full Metal Panic Book 3, Trembling into the Blue. I have to find where I put my bookmark. Oh no. Huh. Okay. That's not where it's meant to be. Did I take it out? Like a goober? Uh-oh. Ah, there it is. It's hiding from me. I can't actually get decent a decent image of the Venom for some reason. My usual source. Or is that it? Nope, that's a different one. Pretty sure it's the Codarl-i, right? Yeah, the best I can find. It's red, and that's right, but it's like this kind of awkward close-up, and it's holding a knife and not its big honking Gatling cannon thing, which is like the equivalent of a, I don't know, a GAU-8 or something. Big honking type affair. Sorry, AK-87 Gatling cannon and a monomolecular cutter because it's got a shank. So the Tuach de Danan's mission to retake the chemical weapons facility is proceeding apace. It's basically all going more or less according to plan. They've successfully dismantled most of the um, Mistral IIs, which I have pictured here for the cover art. I think most of this is line art taken from the animated series. Yeah, that one is. Um, they're a cute little guy. Um, they're more of a. They look more like a walking tank than a lot of the others. Um, it's got like a sensor pod down in the crotch, as well as on the where the head almost would be. Um, they've taken out most of those. They've dismantled the or disarmed the explosives waiting to blow up and spread all the chemical weapons um, that are waiting to be disposed. The only thing they really have left to do is to take out the code name Venom, which is a Codarl-i, a moderately, mildly, very slightly improved alternate version of the one that was there before. But as fate would have it, am I actually reading? No, I am. I might as well be. I'm not. I just remember what I wrote. As fate would have it, it's being piloted by the one, the only, the man, the myth, the legend, Gauron, who, and not the one from Star Trek. It's a different one. It's spelled differently for starters. Honestly, their thirst for violence is pretty comparable, and now I can't see anything but the Klingon Gauron playing Gauron. That actor would nail it, by the way. He would nail it. He would nail it. Where were we? Oh, right. So it turns out he's the pilot of the Venom, because of course he is. You cannot put a good psychopath down, as it turns out. Um, and that's pretty much where we pick up. I really, really wish I could get the in-book art of the Venom's appearance. It's so, so killer. It's like a view looking up at the thing as it's like gesturing flamboyantly with its big honking gun. Wind is whipping its weird hair-looking attachment on its head. It looks like it has a ponytail. It's actually a heat sink of some kind, as I recall. Um, and it's like looking down from the wreckage of this big building with Gauron inside cackling maniacally. It's very nice. I will endeavor to find digital copies of these and see if those are in there. If they aren't in there, then there's no point. But if they are, I can get some of the in-book line art. and artwork from Shikidoji here. Alrighty, with that, let's get crack-a-lackin'. I cannot promise I'm going to get through the whole book. I will promise that I'll get through chapter 4. Um, Yesterday was a long and hard day. Sorry. Chapter 4. The Venom Spreads. 28 August, 0411, local time. Barrel Daub Island, Perio Archipelago. Time to get this party started. Dance for me! Gauron laughed in a voice that crackled with madness. From the roof of the building, his AS fired its Gatling gun wildly. A Gatling gun was like a wheel of 6 connected gun barrels. It rotated at high speed to fire each in rapid succession, letting it rain shells down on them faster than any rifle.
Uru's 1 to Uru's 6, McAllen called. Can you snipe him? Negative, Kurtz responded. I can't get a shot from my current position. I'm on the move now. How about a Hellfire, Uru's 10? Out of ammo, sir, Nguyen replied tersely. Piece of shit.
The 35mm shells shredded buildings and asphalt like confetti and sent the ground-locked machines scattering. Blinded by fragments and white smoke, the M9s continued to run at full speed.
Uru's 7 advance. The rest of you fall back. Give him cover,
McAllen called over the radio.
7, roger.
Sosuke responded shortly, running the arbalest forward in a crouch. Gauron. He didn't even bother telling himself he was supposed to be dead. All he could feel was bitterness and exhaustion. He was so sure he'd finished him back then, in the mountains of North Korea. But he'd been wrong. He didn't know what kind of devil's luck had kept the man alive, but regardless, here he was. He was inside that machine, the Venom, that stood between Sosuke and his goal. In a situation where every second counted, he'd had no time to check if the enemy was dead. Perhaps his assumption had been mere wishful thinking? Gauron, what are you doing here? He wondered. Was this a trap after all? The man was talking like he'd expected them. But if so, why would he show himself so readily? None of it made any sense. Sosuke's feeling before the charge began, that fear, began to well up again from deep inside him. He felt an itchy sensation at the top of his head. His breathing became labored, and he felt panic rising. He urged his nerves to return to their finely honed state, but they wouldn't budge. This wasn't good. He couldn't stay like this. He remembered that destroyed Dark Bushnell he'd seen, and imagined it as one of his allies' M9s. If he messed up, if he failed, if he lost, there would be no going back. It's Gauron I'm facing. I made it out of Sunan, but he's come here to kill my allies again, just like the last time, 3 years ago, in Afghanistan. Oro 7! McAllen's voice snapped him back to reality. He realized with a gasp that he must have slowed down. Look alive over there! McAllen ordered. Gauron was firing grenades from a launcher attached to the Gatling gun. Small bombs rained down on them, bringing calamity in their wake. Explosions burst and popped like bubbles. Sosuke propelled his machine in a zigzag motion, managing to weave it through the grenades. Uru 7! What are you doing? The M9s of McAllen, Mao, and Dunnigan, which had pulled back, all fired their rifles at Gauron. Their indiscriminate barrage rained down on the Venom. 40mm armor-piercing rounds peppered its head, its chest, its shoulders, its legs. No, it only looked like they did. In fact, each round sparked and exploded inches away from the machine. There would be a warp in the air around it, and then a radial fracture would run through the building's wall nearby.
but the Venom itself remained uninjured.
Is this the magic trick you mentioned?
Oh, sorry, that's Dunnigan.
Is this the magic trick you mentioned?
Dunnigan growled. Affirmative. Keep away from it, Sosuke responded, diving to the side to dodge a Gatling strafe. The immense enemy firepower made it impossible for him to close in. The data they had suggested that the effective range of the Arbalest's Lambda driver was a few dozen meters. He had to get into that range, then use that technique. Pour your will into the shot, then fire.
Not like we could get close like this anyway. Damn it!
McAllen cursed, hiding behind the wall of a warehouse, which was looking like a tattered old rag. It was only the M9's remarkable maneuverability that had kept them safe from the curtain of fire so far. If this went on much longer, none of their machines would be safe.
Roost 2 to all units. Don't aim at the machine, aim at the weapon. The ammo belt for the Gatling. Ugh!
What is it?
I'm okay. Minor damage. Hurry!
Without even a Roger, McAllen and the others opened fire. Some leaped, others crouched. They were aiming at the Venom's right side. Most of the shots were blocked by the usual force fields, but Gauron cackled.
You know it's pointless.
A flash, an explosion. A shot had managed to hit the Gatling gun's ammo reserves, igniting the gunpowder. This started a chain reaction through several hundred 35mm rounds, sending shrapnel bursting all around. The force of it pulverized the building and wreathed the area in swelling flames and black smoke. Gauron's AS was nowhere to be seen. Had it been blown to bits, or had it simply flown clear?
Did we do it?
Well,
be careful!
Just then, the Venom seemed clothed in flame as it tore through the smoke from above. It appeared completely undamaged from the point-blank blast.
Well, well, Gauron remarked casually. Not bad at all.
He landed with a crunch, then bolted into a charge, kicking up concrete like sand. The Venom's spontaneous power was equal to, no, greater than, the M9's.
The hell is that thing?
Oh, sorry, that's the wrong character.
The hell is that thing?
Dunnigan shouted.
12, fall back.
Sosuke ordered as he faced down the machine's charge. Now was the time to use the Lambda driver. He fixed the shot cannon at his mechanical hip and took aim. He could see the Venom in his targeting box, holding a large monomolecular cutter in each hand.
Kasheem!
Gauron laughed, prolonging every syllable. It was exactly like that moment 4 months ago.
It's time,
Sosuke whispered. I can do this, he reminded himself. I've done it before. I will make it work. If I don't, if I fail, he swallowed hard. Calm your mind. You have to stay calm. Focus your will. You have to focus. Imagine the shot. Imagine it. The image is important. It's absolutely crucial. Sosuke pulled the trigger. The shot cannon blasted out a 57mm shell. His aim was perfect. The winged, armor-piercing shot flew right into Gauron's AS. No, it exploded into sparks just in front of the Venom, as every previous shot had done. Sosuke's jaw dropped. Nothing had happened. He'd just fired a normal shot. The Lambda driver hadn't activated. He gritted his teeth. The Venom was already flying at him. Its knife-wielding hands were spread wide, as if to take the arbalest in an embrace.
Sosuke!
Before Gauron's knives could tear into the arbalest's cockpit, another M9 came flying from the side and tackled Sosuke out of the way. The two machines fell together in a tangle. The knife's point sliced through the air where he'd been a second earlier. Sosuke sat his machine up.
Mao? He questioned. Get it together. Are you even paying?
That was as far as Mao got. Gauron had stopped on a dime and turned to face them.
He thrust out his right hand, and with his index finger pointed at Mao's M9, he whispered, "Bang." There was a sudden warping along a line of empty space between the Venom and her machine. Something ran along that line, an invisible power that slammed into the M9 and the noise that followed was unsettling. A low, dull thunk, cracking and screaming of the machine's metal frame, fluid bursting out of something elastic. An internal explosion of some kind caused the M9's head to fly out of its socket. It dangled limply against its back like a whatever that is, rokurokubi. I guess it's some kind of a doll. Rokurokubi, trailing various broken cables and pipes. Shock absorbent fled from the pipes and pooled on the ground below. "Mao?" Sosuke called out nervously. There was no response. The M9 lay limp and motionless in the arbalest's arms, with no sign of movement at all. He didn't even have time to check on the pilot's safety. Gauron had already turned his finger gun to the arbalest. Instinctively sensing the danger he was in, Sosuke had his machine pick up the M9 and beat a swift retreat. Gauron released a low chuckle. "Come on, why so scared? I just pointed at you, that's all." Sosuke bared his teeth and glared ahead of him as he laid Mao's machine on the ground. "Uru 7, what happened?" McAllen and Dunnigan's M9 took up his flanks and fired their rifles at Gauron from several hundred meters away. Gauron, who appeared to regard their attack as no more than a light drizzle, hunched over as if gathering power. "All right," he said, "let's try this again." Gauron brandished his monomolecular cutters and went back on the offensive. Sosuke flew back down, releasing a blast from his shot cannon. "Uru 7 here. 2 is down. I don't know her status. Check on her while I draw the Venom's fire." "What? Say that I said Mao's down. Check in on her already." He fired and fired, but Gauron was relentless. Each shell from the shot cannon was deflected. He didn't even leave a dent. "This isn't like before," Sosuke realized. The last time they'd fought, his opponent's use of the Lambda driver had also appeared limited. But now it was different. There was nothing holding Gauron back. Even total surprise shots weren't phasing him. On top of that, Sosuke couldn't use the device he needed to fight back. No matter how he focused, he couldn't get the Lambda driver to work. He was panicking too much to use it, and his inability to use it increased his panic. It was a terrible spiral. Just then he received a communication. "Sosuke, it's me." "Kurtz?" Sosuke asked with surprise.
"Lure the Venom to the east side of the island," Kurtz told him. "Get it back to Building D1.
Building D1 was the one Gauron had appeared on earlier.
"What's the plan?" "Don't ask. Just keep cool and get going. Leave this to me."
"All right," he eventually agreed. As instructed, Sosuke raced his machine to the northeast building. Kurtz's voice seemed awfully composed for someone who must have heard what happened to Mao. But Sosuke knew that was no reason to take him lightly. The mask he usually wore, of the perpetually laid-back, shallow man who irritated his comrades, there in the cockpit, hidden from the eyes of others, he had let it fall away. Gauron pursued the arbalest. They were a match in agility and explosive power, so it was hard to completely shake him. "Are you just going to run away forever?" Gauron jeered. "Why won't you play along?" Sosuke had managed to get close to the building. It was 10 stories tall, 5 or 6 times an AS's height, but the floors from the 6th up had been ravaged by the Gatling gun's explosion.
"All right, get in front of it and hold it there."
The arbalest stopped near the entrance on the building's east side, which was littered with the remains of cars and concrete, and turned to face his pursuer. That's when Sosuke realized. The place he'd arrived at was in the direct line of sight from Kurtz and Nguyen's sniper point. He increased his sensor's magnification and saw an M9 readying a large rifle far off in the ocean. Right ahead of him, Gauron's AS was drawing close. Sosuke turned his shot cannon toward the red machine and fired off a few shots. Each one was deflected. "I'm disappointed, Kashim," Gauron commented lightly. "I was hoping you'd have grown a little more skilled." His knife flashed through the air. Sosuke blocked it with the shot cannon, with which Gauron sliced in two. There was another flash, and part of his machine's shoulder armor fell away. A sharp thrust came at him from either side. Sosuke launched his machine forward hard and managed to grab his opponent's wrists. A normal operator would be dead before he'd reached this stage. "Fighting hard, I see. But—" The hands holding the knives continued to push forward. The arbalest's electromagnetic muscles creaked from the force as they tried to push back, pitting mechanical strength against strength. But the power of the enemy machine was incredible, and it had gravity on its side. The arbalest was forced back one step, two steps, until its back hit the wall of the building. Its frame creaked. The tip of the swiftly rotating, vibrating monomolecular cutter inched its way toward the arbalest's chest. Sosuke groaned. "Well, what now? You're about to die!" Gauron screamed. "And that girl you love so very much—" "07," Kurtz said calmly. "Stay put." In the next instant, Gauron's machine took a hit from the side. Shards of shredded metal went flying, and the enemy machine's head snapped back. Even from 4 kilometers away, Kurtz's shot had flown true. But could it even guard against surprise attacks from that distance? The 76 mm shell still wasn't enough to pierce the enemy's force field. Fortunately, the sheer force of the hit did send the red AS off balance, and that was enough to create a crucial opening. Immediately, Kurtz poured on more shots, a second, a third, a fourth, a fifth. These shots were not aimed at Gauron, they were aimed at the half-demolished building behind him. Each precisely aimed blast took out one pillar or support. With the building's upper half already holding on by a thread, the removal of these braces caused the whole structure to snap. No, snap failed to capture the gravity of the situation. It was a cacophony of steel supports being wrenched apart, of concrete imploding, of every piece of glass in the building shattering immediately to powder. Hundreds of tons of building material were collapsing down from above in an earth-shaking, ear-splitting tumult, all headed straight for the arbalest and its enemy.
"Get out of the way!"
Came Kurtz's warning. But it wasn't needed. Sosuke dropped his machine down to sweep Gauron's legs out from under him. Its balance lost, the red AS fell to its knees. Without even a glance back at the enemy, the arbalest then leapt away, low and fast, like a bat out of hell. An instant later, the collapsing building hit the ground, crushing the red AS beneath. The ground shook and roared. Pulverized building material, walls, floor, pipes, and furniture were scattered everywhere. There was so much dust in the air that the whole world seemed to go white.
"Sosuke," Kurtz asked, "are you still alive?"
"I think so," he replied. The arbalest, which had thrown itself to the ground in its escape, slowly picked itself up. That was a reckless move on Kurtz's part, Sosuke thought. One wrong move and Sosuke would have died with Gauron. But he also had to admire his marksmanship. From a distance of 4 kilometers away, the pillars of the building must have looked like needles. Yet he'd gone 4 for 4, taking them all out in seconds. "Your skill is impressive," Sosuke said in tones of great admiration.
"Bet your ass it is,"
Kurtz grumbled. Just then, Dunnigan's M9 came running.
"You get him?"
"I'm not sure. Give me your gun," Sosuke ordered, "and then stand back."
The arbalest took the 40mm rifle from Dunnigan's M9. He checked the remaining rounds, then kept the rifle carefully pointed forward, held in both hands. Oh, sorry. As he approached the mountain of rubble. He had no confirmation yet if Gauron was dead or alive. Surely, not even the Lambda driver could hold up against a destructive force like that. Right? But what if he was lying under the rubble, waiting for an opportunity to burst out and fly at them? Then he'd have to use the Lambda driver to finish the enemy off once and for all. But can I do it? Sosuke wondered. His hands were soaked with sweat. Just then there was movement in the rubble. Sosuke was startled. It wasn't a sudden movement, just chunks of reinforced concrete slowly swelling upward and falling away. The red machine appeared. It wasn't holding a weapon. Its hands were both raised, and it spewed steam from its joints as it straightened up awkwardly. Uncertain of his opponent's intentions, Sosuke's finger hesitated on the trigger. He hadn't let his guard down, but he also wasn't certain that shooting him would work. "I guess you win this one. I overheated again," Gauron said at last. There was a sound of depressurization. The red machine's chest trembled, then slowly split in half. He'd opened the hatch. For any AS operator, opening a hatch in front of the enemy was a sign of surrender. ASs were modeled after the human body, and given their skeletal structure, it was nearly impossible to move with the torso split like that. As far as Sosuke could tell, the Venom was no exception. "It seems our positions are reversed from the last time," Gauron chuckled. "I surrender. Do with me as you will." Sosuke quietly seethed. "Get down from there." He was struggling to keep his voice calm and soft. "You're not going to shoot me. You may find yourself regretting that." That was the last word from the external speakers. A few seconds later a man's figure emerged. He was wearing a dark red operator's uniform. There was a vertical scar on his forehead and a burn scar along his neck. He looked thinner than he had 4 months earlier, but it was Gauron, no question. "So, what will you do with me?" asked the terrorist with a rueful smile. August 28, 0440 hours, local time. Barreldaub Island, Perio Archipelago. Within a mere 30 seconds after the battle with Gauron... Oh, got it. Sorry. Within a mere 30 seconds after the battle with Gauron ended, the transport helicopters from the Tuatha De Danann arrived. The members of the PRT, Primary Response Team, disembarked and scattered throughout the base, while the M9s hung behind them for support. There were a few sporadic shootouts with the remaining enemy infantry, but they managed to secure the base without any serious injuries. They took 17 hostages from the terrorist group. Most of them were struggling mercenaries who had been crowded out of various worldwide conflict zones. The American base personnel, 48 in total, were also liberated from the barracks where they'd been held. Normally, there would have been more men on base, but since it was summer vacation season, over half had been away. As for Mithril's own losses, Melissa Mao had survived. Gauron's finger gun shot had passed just above the cockpit block, so it hadn't actually hurt its operator. She'd just been knocked out by a concussion caused by the force of impact. The best news of all was that they had recovered Gauron and the Venom virtually unharmed. Investigating man and machine would let them learn some things about the organization backing them. On paper, the mission was a roaring success. But only on paper. To Sosuke, what happened back there felt like the furthest thing from success there could be. His failure to use the Arbalest's Lambda driver had almost gotten Mao killed, and they'd only survived thanks to Kurtz's quick thinking and Gauron's stall-out.
In other words, he himself had contributed nothing. He'd gotten lucky, no more. McAllen had said, "Don't sweat it. You did well." Kurtz had said, "Hey, sometimes shit happens." Dunnigan and Nguyen had nothing to say at all. The base was in a clamor, with the counterinsurgency complete. Sosuke was in his arbalest, standing in a pockmarked heliport on the base's west side, protecting the landed helicopters. Nearby lay Mao's damaged M9 and the red machine, the Venom. Sosuke turned his eyes to a small transport helicopter. Next to it stood Major Kalainen, who had come with the PRT, as well as Captain McAllen and the tightly restrained Gauron. "Hey there, Ivan. How many years has it been now?" Gauron seemed perfectly at ease, even in the presence of the large, burly Russian with eyes like ice. Kalainen stared closely at the terrorist, his gaze one of murderous intent. It was a look that would cause a normal person's heart to leap from their chest in terror. "What are you planning?" the Russian asked at length. "Planning? Whatever do you mean?" Gauron chuckled. Kalainen watched him a moment longer. "If you insist," he allowed. "Just a warning. Don't expect the smallest hint of mercy. There won't be any deals made here. I'll make you confess everything and then I'll erase you from this earth. Remember that." "I'm trembling already," Gauron mocked. Kalainen turned and addressed to the soldier next to him. "Take him away." With a shove from the PRT member, Gauron boarded the helicopter. Kalainen and Captain McAllen took their distance as the machine began to lift off. "Get your men out of here within 5 minutes. I'm going to stay on the base as planned." "Sir," Captain McAllen acknowledged. Kalainen still had some petty politicking to deal with, contacting the incoming U.S. military forces and negotiating with them about the aftermath. Except for a few of his subordinates, all other staff and equipment, ASs and transport helicopters, would be withdrawing at once. Gauron and the Venom would be moved to the Dedanan, while the other hostages would be remanded to the United States custody. Kalainen really did believe he should have shot the man dead on the spot, but headquarters had ordered that Gauron be taken in. This stealing of the terrorists' leader would surely earn blowback from the Americans. While walking with McAllen, he sank into dark thoughts. "That man clearly has something up his sleeve, a lifeline at the very least." The Gauron that Kalainen knew would never engage in such reckless terrorism. He might act self-destructive and hedonistic, but he was still a professional. He'd construct his plans carefully, with achievable goals and a guarantee of his own safety in mind. Gauron wasn't suicidal. He'd put his own life over that of the whole planet. Kalainen knew that for sure. By contrast, the seizure of that base, the absurd demands, the easy surrender, none of it fit his usual modus operandi. It was no wonder Tessa was concerned. The base attack could well have been a diversion for Gauron's allies to attack some other critical facility elsewhere. Mithril's top brass, having already acknowledged that possibility, were keeping an ear to the ground and issuing warnings to the security forces of various nations. There was no sign of any such activity at the moment, but if the enemy had made the right preparations, they'd effectively have no way to guard against it. It was just like what had happened here. They were always stuck reacting. It was a fundamental problem with Mithril. Deterrence was their goal, and they called themselves invincible, but everyone in the organization knew that that was a lie. It wasn't a problem limited to Mithril, of course. All anti-terror entities faced a similar dilemma. The initiative in a battle always lay with the attackers. Mithril's lone advantage was their advanced equipment and elite personnel, but that, in turn, meant their expansion was limited. A power to crush evil that was extremely potent, but rare. This was the reason the anti-terrorist mercenary organization had named itself after Mithril, the fictional metal from the works of J.R.R. Tolkien. Kalinin broke out of his musings. "Ask Colonel Testarossa for instructions regarding the Venom," he said. "I leave the treatment of the man, Gauron, to you." "Sir," McAllen responded. "Keep at least 2 men on him at all times," Kalinin cautioned. "Who they are is up to you. Following his physical examination, keep him under strict lock and key, and do not remove his restraints under any circumstances. Keep him completely isolated until quarantine is over. Once he's received his bill of health, ignore any further requests for medical aid." "You mean any sudden turns for the worse?" McAllen grinned. He was talking about feigned illness. "Yes. I don't care if he dies as a result. There is no need to afford him any respect," Kalinin said. "Treat him like an extremely intelligent, exceedingly savage animal." "Understood, sir." McAllen saluted, then ran back to his own M9. The Mithril transport helicopters receded into the distance. Some were large, with ASs dangling beneath. Others were small, for personnel transport. They must have engaged their ECSs in flight, because they all suddenly disappeared in the morning sun. Plumes of smoke were still rising here and there around the base, and the barracks, communication center, administration building, and hangar were all riddled with holes. Kurama crawled out from under the remains of the dark bushnell left on the shore. He'd determined there was no more need to stay in hiding. Hmm. He gazed at the last vestiges of the helicopters, a pale purple band hanging in the air, and his round nose let out a snort. "There goes Gauron," he thought. Luck would determine what happened to him next, and that man's devil's luck was not to be underestimated. No, perhaps the pancreatic cancer was a balancing of the books for all of the undeserved good fortune in his past. He was a dead man walking now, a man with nothing left to fear. Kurama put the chance of the plan's success at about 50-50. Bad odds. They both must be mad. He pulled out a satellite communicator module, extended the antenna, and swiftly manipulated the panel. Soon he'd opened an encrypted channel. "Yes?" came the voice on the other end. It was the languid voice of a young man. He sounded sleepy. "It's me." "Oh, Kurama, how'd it go?" There was a sound of hair being brushed back, and a faint sound of rustling cloth. He could hear a woman's nasal moaning in the background. "Gauron's been taken to the toy box," Kurama said. "Hmm. Sounds like I won the bet. Mr. Gold owes me 3 leviathans and $5. Next time I see Gauron, I'll have to treat him to dinner. This gave Kurama pause. "You think we'll see him again?" he asked doubtfully. "I certainly hope so," the boy said, and then yawned. "It took me 3 days to create that special program, after all, and Mr. Zink laid all that groundwork. Well, I want that rotten little sister of mine to learn a lesson." "Really, sir?" "Yes, at the very least it should get her attention," the boy reasoned. "I'll wait for good news, but I won't get my hopes up. So, are you heading back now?"
"Yes."
"Be careful, then."
"Thank you."
The transmission concluded. Kurama closed up the transceiver and threw it into the ocean. He checked his clothing. It was your basic American military uniform. His rank was corporal, and his dog tag read J. Rock. He had an ID card, too. A dozen or so U.S. military helicopters were approaching from the northern skies.
"Let's see. Which should I ride back?"
Kurama wondered. 27 August, 2015 hours. Hold the phone. Did we go back in time? Oh, yes, we went back in time. We're good. It's all right. 27 August, 2015 hours. Greenwich Mean Time. Main hangar, Tuach Dedanan. Once all the helicopters had landed in the hangar, the ship's hull, aka the flight hatch, slowly closed with a muffled roar. The ASs detached from the helicopters. Nope, we just got the date wrong, I guess. It's printed wrong. I'm not crazy. And we managed to fast forward 14 hours. Something's wrong here. Something's screwy. I'm losing my mind. No, the last date that we got, yeah, was 28th August at 0440 hours. Oh, it's Greenwich Mean Time. Don't mind me. Completely losing my mind and perspective. 27 August, 2015 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. Main hangar, Tuach Dedanan. Once all the helicopters had landed in the hangar, the ship's hull, aka the flight hatch, slowly closed with a muffled roar. The ASs detached from the helicopters. Then each walked to their designated spots and knelt down. The helicopters stopped their engines, folded up their rotors, and were locked down. Deck crew and maintenance personnel ran busily around the hangar, securing machinery and disarming weapons. Kaname stood at the hangar's entrance, fidgeting. Combatants from the earlier battle kept passing by. They mostly looked tired, but at the same time, relieved. Excuse me, jeez Louise. They mostly looked tired, but at the same time, relieved. A few even winked to Kaname. It looks like everyone's okay then, she was thinking, when, just then, Mao was carried past on a stretcher. She looked like she'd been wounded. Kaname tried to call out to her in concern, but the middle-aged ship's doctor, Peggy, who was standing next to her, said, "Don't worry, she just took a tumble is all." Mao was taken to the sick bay. Kaname watched the stretcher go, turned around, and found Sosuke standing there. He must have been seeing Mao off, too. He was safe. Relief flooded over her, but as she opened her mouth to speak, she realized it. Sosuke? It was clear that he was depressed about something. His face was its usual sullen one, with its usual tight frown, but his eyes were scanning the floor listlessly. He had none of his usual vigor. Welcome back, she said hesitantly. Sosuke didn't respond. He just sat down on a small electric tractor parked nearby and didn't even seem to notice that Kaname was there. She had come all this way to make sure Sosuke was all right, but of course he didn't seem to realize that. An alarm rang out from the submarine's speakers, and a synthetic voice called, "Dive! Dive!" The floor tilted a bit, vibrating. At some point, the hangar had come to be nearly deserted, and a hush had fallen over it. "You, you don't have to get back to the duty room?" she asked. "No," he muttered. "Why not?" "I made a mistake. I can't face my comrades," he said coldly, before starting to remove his operator's uniform. He looked like he took off the cast-like neck. Wow. Okay. Let's try this all again. He took off the cast-like neck brace designed to prevent whiplash, then the thin body armor, and then unzipped the chest, which acted a bit like bikers' coveralls. He tied the sleeves around the hips of his still covered lower half, but on top he was just wearing a tank top. "Did someone die?" Kaname asked cautiously. "No." "It's all good then, right? Mausan didn't seem that bad off, either." "Don't trivialize it." Sosuke raised his voice. "I'm not trying to trivialize it," Kaname stuttered. "She could just as easily have died because of me and that AS." "Huh?" Eyes still averted, Sosuke began to speak, the words flowing from his lips as if a dam had burst. "I couldn't use the device, that lambda driver, properly.
Pour your will into it. Imagine the shot. None of it makes any sense to me. I'm sick of it. It's too vague and random to serve as a weapon. It's just like magic. They should get a shaman to pilot it. It's not a soldier. He looked at the arbalest parked on the other side of the hangar. I don't like that machine, he went on bitterly. I hate it. It lets its operator down at the most crucial times. It's not a tool for a professional. Whoever made it is the worst engineer ever. Kaname had never seen Sosuke complain about anything like this. Fighting back her numb surprise, she clutched the hem of her apron and said quietly, Hey, why don't you get some rest? You must be tired. I'm not, he said shortly. But, this isn't like you. Kaname genuinely believed that. This wasn't like him. This wasn't like Sosuke at all. She didn't know what had happened, but to say all these vicious things. Usually he was much more forward driven. He never stooped to criticizing the people or things around him. What would you know about me? He said in a harsh whisper, restraining a shout. Huh? She blinked. You talk about what's like me as if you knew. Do you realize what they've pushed on me? I'm a mercenary, he went on. I was doing fine on normal missions with normal equipment. But ever since that mission 4 months ago, all I get is criticism. Gauron, that AS, being your bodyguard. None of it's what I'm cut out for. It's all a nuisance. You...
Oh, that's right. I have a image shift here. There it is.
You... Kaname felt like she'd been smacked in the back of her head. A nuisance. Being her bodyguard was... She'd never realized that was how he felt about her. You... You know, she managed to squeeze out, it's not like I asked you to do that. You're the one who forced his way into my life, so quit if that's what you want. I can't, he said tiredly. I'm the only one who can execute this mission. Oh, please. Mission? You can't. Sosuke looked up at Kaname. His eyes were exhausted, indifferent, hollow. It sounds like you're the one who's tired. I'm not tired, she told him. I'm worried about you, okay? But you just... I know, Sosuke said, cutting her off. I get it, so go back to your room. Kaname didn't say anything else. She just turned around and left. She passed Kurtz and an East Asian soldier at the door, and without even a word of greeting, dragged herself listlessly into the hall. Even after Kaname had left, Sosuke remained, blackly glaring at the floor. The fact that Gauron was alive. The fact that he was on board with them. One sec. All right. Siren fading. The fact that Gauron was alive. The fact that he was on board with them. The arbalest, Mao, the Lambda driver. His mind was seething with fear and regret, and he couldn't see a way forward. He'd hit a wall. His head felt heavy. Sosuke! He heard a voice. Kurtz had come up to him at some point, with Corporal Yang trailing behind him. Sosuke looked up curiously. Kurtz's fist slammed into his left cheek. With no way to stop a sucker punch, Sosuke tumbled off the electric trailer and crashed into the floor. It must have cut his cheek open because he could taste blood. He grunted, and after some stirring, looked up. Kurtz was clearly trying to hit Sosuke again, while Yang was doing everything he could to restrain him. Don't do it, Kurtz, Yang pleaded. Shut up! Kurtz snarled back as they struggled against each other. Sosuke wiped some blood from the corner of his mouth. What do you think you're doing? He asked curiously. Sorry for eavesdropping, but I couldn't stand another minute of your damned hero act, Kurtz told him sarcastically. That's all. Hero act? Shut up, Kurtz said coldly. You couldn't be a big man out there, so you want to sulk like a child and take it out on a girl. You're like a wife-beating bastard who gets his neighbors calling the cops on him every night. You get it?
I'm not taking it out on anyone, Sosuke cried, confused.
Yeah, right, asshole. You made a nice girl cry, Kurtz yelled back. You're a piece of shit, and the only way you'll learn is if I beat your face in.
What? Kaname was crying? When? Why? Sosuke had been so focused on his own problems that he hadn't given any thought to her at all. I made her cry? Yang managed to talk Kurtz down into some semblance of calm. His shoulders heaving, Kurtz turned his eyes away from Sosuke.
I get why you're on edge, okay? He said brusquely. Look, I'm not mad about what happened on the mission. That arbalest is a weird ass. We all knew it might crap out on you. That's why me and Mao and McAllen were there. But we captured the Venom and we took back the base. That means the job went well. Am I wrong?
But Mao,
Sosuke started. Are you kidding me? She goes through that shit all the time, Kurtz objected scornfully. You're not some damned rookie. You know that.
Sosuke said nothing.
You think you're the only one fighting out there? Get your head out of your ass.
Kurtz spat, then strode out of the hangar. Yang remained behind, hands on his hips, and let out a long sigh. Sosuke, are you okay? Yeah, he mumbled. Earlier, Kurt said he wanted to tease you because you looked so depressed. I think it was his way of trying to cheer you up. But when he heard what you said to her, he just lost it. I see, Sosuke responded, and then stood up. He wiped the corner of his mouth again. The taste of blood. The pain. He knew the sensations well, yet there was something unfamiliar about them. He thought it over and realized he'd never actually been hit like that before. Of course, that wasn't about to cheer him up. August 0115. Yes, 0115 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. Central Control Room, Tuach Dadanan. After diving to 300 meters, they set a course north-northeast at a speed of 30 knots. There was a U.S. Navy submarine hiding beneath the thermal layer, the veil of ocean water that cut off sound waves. Of course, they knew the Dadanan, which they called the Toy Box, would be in the vicinity of Barrel Island right now. And on top of that, it seemed that they'd acquired data on the Dadanan's acoustic signature. Anti-submarine patrol planes, anti-submarine helicopters, and frigates were all on the move. Tessa used their SCD and EMFC to skillfully slip through their blockades. It was the usual game, and they won in the usual way. She looked at the nautical chart on her screen. According to the weather team's report, there was a low-pressure system approaching from the west, and they'd have storms up above for about a day. This was a good thing for them. It would keep the American anti-submarine helicopters at bay, and they might have to give up on tracking them entirely. If everything went well, they could be back at Merida Island Base by tomorrow night. Tessa wanted to check in on Mao and talk things over with Sosuke, but she didn't have time for that yet. She had to stay in the control room and be on the lookout for the smallest abnormality. She was worried about their prisoner, Gauron. Not only was he alive, but he'd appeared with a new Lambda driver mounted machine in tow. Kalainen, who had remained behind on Barrel Island, had radioed to tell her to watch out for him. He's probably planning something, he'd added. Tessa had had a bad feeling about things ever since she had first heard the island was occupied, but this had proven even worse than she'd thought. A smell of danger seemed to waft from the first briefing room, the place where the man was being held. Still, Sosuke and the others had done well. The fact that they had taken the Venom in without a scratch was nothing short of a miracle. Or perhaps I should say it's everything I expect from Sagara-san, she thought.
Despite her occupation with the command of the vessel, and having not yet heard the details of the Venom's capture, she allowed herself a private moment of heart-fluttering indulgence. Colonel, Second Lieutenant Lemming, an engineering officer, entered the control room. She had been ordered to do a quick examination of the Venom, which now sat in the hold. What is it? Tessa responded. Well, I haven't done a full analysis yet, but this LD seems fundamentally identical to the one in the ARX-7, though there are a few minor differences. One thing that's for sure is that it's from the same line as the one in the Behemoth. I see, but there's something else that concerns me. Lieutenant Lemming went on. That AS, they said it overheated and surrendered, but... What? Tessa asked with some alarm. It still seems perfectly functional. It had some armor snapped off here and there, but the ECS lenses in the shoulders took damage, but... I'm flubbing the accent that I'm going for, so I apologize to everyone from the British Isles. I'm just mangling it. Just not my morning. Images of the AS snapping to life and running rampant in their hangar raced suddenly through Tessa's mind. There's no danger of it starting up on its own, is there? She asked. Lemming gave her a quiet smile. No, ma'am. We've unhooked its generator. Give me a sec. My brain's off. No, ma'am. We've unhooked its generator. No matter what its AI has been programmed to do, it can't move without a power source. Without a power source. It also has a self-destruct device, but that won't go off unless someone sets it off. I'm glad to hear that, but in that case, why wasn't the AS non-functional? More to the point, why had Gauron given up when he could have kept fighting? Did he get himself taken hostage on purpose? She wondered. Impossible. Out of the question. The man had undergone a full-body search, had been put under the strictest restraints, and was under round-the-clock surveillance from SRT staff. He'd cleared quarantine as well, so there was no chance he'd brought some virus on board. That terrorist would have no opportunities to escape or to try anything on them. And yet... Well, thank you for your hard work, Tessa finally said. We'll give the Venom a more thorough analysis back at base. Yes, Colonel. Lieutenant Lemming saluted her, then left the control room. Maduka-san. Tessa addressed her XO once she was gone. Yes, Captain. I want to talk to you about something. August 28, 0110 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. U.S. Navy submarine Pasadena, West Pacific Ocean. It had been a while since they'd received orders from Fleet Command, but they came in as follows. Sometime in the next 12 hours, the toy box might pass through your area. Run quiet. If you find it, tail it, and take in as much data as you can. Commander Killy B. Sailor, captain of the USS Pasadena, crushed the paper they were printed on into a ball and groaned in displeasure. And how the hell are we supposed to find it? Damn it! They had to search for a machine they'd lost sight of at point-blank range in an area with a radius of 100 kilometers. It would be like finding a needle in a haystack. I'm sure Command isn't expecting that much from us, offered his XO, Lieutenant Takanaka. Other ships of the Pacific Fleet were apparently further south, hunting for the toy box. The Pasadena was somewhat isolated by comparison. Probably not, Commander Sailor agreed. You know, missions like these always make me think of Nobby. Who? Lieutenant Takanaka blinked. Ah, when I was a kid, I led this pee-wee baseball team, see? Oh? We called ourselves the Oklahoma Sailors, the commander reminisced. One of the kids was this loser named Nobby. I put him in the right field, batting eighth, and otherwise hung him out to dry. Any time he made an error, I pulled his pants down in front of Kathy. Who's Kathy? Lieutenant Takanaka asked. Sailor didn't answer, but his gaze turned distance. Times like these, I think about how Nobby must have felt stuck out there in the cold of right field. Did the story need to be that long? What? Are you mocking my beautiful boyhood memories? You mean that blathering on about your days as a Bumpkinville bully? Takanaka retorted. Why, you... For the next 3 minutes, Sailor and Takanaka laid into each other. The officer of the deck finally said, "That's enough," and separated them, and the two panted for breath. After a minute of rest and 5 minutes of arguing, they decided to lay the sub low just under the thermal layer and wait for the toy box, the untrackable toy box, to pass. In other words, they had a dull 12 hours of picking their noses and waiting ahead. Or so he thought. 28 August, 0431 hours, Greenwich Mean Time. Galley, Tuach de Danann. Tucked in between the new microwave and oven there was a space. It was dark, no more than shoulder width wide, the perfect place for someone to crawl into her shell when she was feeling low. Kaname was curled up in that space, wallowing in her depression. She hugged her knees, gazed gloomily at the floor, and radiated isolation. All she could think about was Sosuke. She'd feel angry, then disappointed, then sad, and then pitiful. Whenever her thoughts reached a standstill, her eyes would fill with tears. Then she'd realize how pathetic she was being and go back to anger. Tomorrow, she thought, I'll ask Tessa to take him off my bodyguard duty. Maybe they could get someone else to take over, or remove the requirement altogether. Whichever, it didn't matter. He hated being around her and thought of her as a nuisance. She didn't want to be a burden any more. That's all it was. The cook, Private First Class Kasuya Hiroshi, let her have her space. Sosuke had come to the mess a few hours before to ask Kasuya if he'd seen... Oh, geez, my brain completely skipped a paragraph. My mouth didn't, but I'm sorry. I would have... The cook, Private First Class Kasuya Hiroshi, let her have her space. Sosuke had come to the mess a few hours before to ask Kasuya if he'd seen Chidori Kaname, but he'd covered for her and said no. There was something strange about watching two Japanese men speak to each other in English. When Kaname got tired, she dozed off. Then she woke up from her shallow dream and went back to her circling thoughts. Eventually, she got tired and fell asleep again. The cycle repeated over and over. Finally, as if unable to watch her self-torment any longer, Kasuya spoke up. He bookmarked the book about oceanography that he'd been reading and walked up to her. Hey, Kaname-chan, he tried cautiously. You can stay here if you want, but you should probably eat something. After a long pause, she croaked out, No, thanks. And if you're going to sleep, you should probably go back to the captain's quarters, he advised. Don't want to, she managed again. She couldn't stand to see or talk to anyone right now. Don't be like that, Kasuya said soothingly. A shower and a nice rest might help you feel better. Kaname looked up at him emptily. Am I a nuisance to you? What? No, I wouldn't say that, he said with a strained smile. She'd become a burden here, too, it seemed. With a sense of resignation, Kaname stood up and dragged herself out of the galley. Same time frame. First briefing room. Tuach de Danann. Tuach de Danann. There we go. Danann? Guard over the terrorist was being handled in snappy 1-hour shifts. The Dedannan had no brig facilities, as they were rarely needed, and space was at a premium on a submarine. Therefore, on the rare occasion they ended up with a prisoner on board, they just used a currently unoccupied room. In this case, it was the first briefing room. Private Liang of the PRT was taking his second turn on watch. He and the SRT's Sergeant Dunnigan sat near the room's entrance, watching over the terrorist. Watching was all the job consisted of. The terrorist in question, Wang didn't know his name, had been placed in a straitjacket, gagged, handcuffed, and chained to the chair. His prosthetic leg had been removed and was being stored in another room with his other equipment. There was no way he could possibly free himself from restraints like that. Lang was bored, even though he was only 10 minutes into a shift. His attempt at smothering a yawn earned a glare from Sergeant Dunnigan. "Sorry."
"You'd never make it as a sniper," Dunnigan told him acerbically.
A sniper needed discipline to hold a single position for hours at a time. Basically, he was telling Liang he lacked that discipline. Dunnigan was a big, burly man with a round, shaved head and a thick scar over his right eye. His eyes were a pale blue. They hadn't talked much before, but as far as Lang had seen, the man was always in a bad mood. Lang sniffed. "Maybe not, but not even a Shanghai acrobat could slip out of those restraints. So,
"Part of our job is to be prepared for any danger that might come,"
Dunnigan told him.
"Don't forget that."
"Danger?" Lang scoffed. "What kind of danger could there be?" Dunnigan's brow furrowed, and he assumed a posture of careful deliberation. He checked his watch, then responded, gazing at the terrorist.
"Let's see. How about this?"
Dunnigan took a silencer out of his pocket and screwed it into the muzzle of his pistol. Lang watched him in confusion.
"Let's say, just for an example, what if I did this?"
Dunnigan turned the gun toward Lang. The man's jaw dropped. "What are you doing? That's not fair."
"Sure, it's fair. This is one possible danger. That's why you can't let your guard down."
His blue eyes stared right into Lang's. They were serious, like a teacher offering a grave life lesson. The gun remained trained on him. The private gulped and nodded. I'm very sorry, Sergeant, sir."
"Glad you get the point."
Dunnigan smiled broadly. As Liang relaxed, the sergeant, still grinning, added this.
"But you learned it too late."
He pulled the trigger. Private Lang died instantly from a bullet to the brain. The shot was extremely quiet. The chains, handcuffs, straitjacket, and gag were removed, and Gauron could finally find a measure of comfort. He rubbed at his joints, stiff from their long confinement, and rolled out his neck. As his prosthetic leg was still missing, he remained seated in the chair.
I thought for a minute you were going to leave me out to dry,"
Gauron said. He was all smiles, but Dunnigan was stone-faced.
"Can't say I didn't think about it, but that last mission made up my mind for me," Dunnigan admitted. "I can't stay here. They're all a bunch of spoiled babies."
"Are they?" In fact, Gauron was meeting this man for the first time. It was only recently that Mr. Zink, their spy in the upper echelons of Mithril, had begun to take action. The man who was freeing Gauron now was one who had been won over by Mr. Zink. Most people at Mithril were extremely content with their lot there, so finding potential traitors was a job that apparently came with great difficulty and danger. Of course, that was none of Gauron's concern. His job was to take their submarine in unharmed, or to destroy it. "Anyway, welcome to Amalgam, Mr.
"Dunnigan. John Dunnigan."
A pleasure, John." Gauron held out his right hand. Dunnigan ignored it, and said, with cold fire,
"Watch your mouth, Chinese. I don't let just anyone call me John."
"Uh-huh." Gauron lifted an eyebrow.
"We're just partners in a business arrangement,"
Dunnigan reminded him.
"Don't forget that."
Gauron withdrew his hand and scratched at his temple. Then, gauging the other man's expression, he said, "So, just to be sure, I assume you don't take orders from me, too?"
"Yeah, I'm glad you understand,
Without even standing up out of his chair, Gauron had grabbed Dunnigan's wrist, and before the other man could react, he twisted and threw him off balance.
Then he spun him by the arm, turned him, pushed him down, pulled, and like magic, Dunnigan's massive body went flying, flipped, and ended up on the ground. Dunnigan gasped in shock. Gauron dropped onto his fallen opponent. At some point, a knife that Dunnigan had smuggled in had ended up in Gauron's hand. Goodness me! Was that you letting your guard down, John? He pressed the knife to his opponent's neck. Incidentally, that's jujitsu. From my home country, Japan. John? What? You? Dunnigan struggled for words and breath. Watch your mouth. I don't take orders from you. Gauron scoffed. That's not how it works, John. The knife's tip began to inch into Dunnigan's flesh. Dunnigan hissed and began to cry out. You see, John, even in business one must pay respect to his predecessors. You know that, don't you, John? Dunnigan's body trembled with agony. Sweat rose on his brow. Then, at last, as if unable to bear it any longer, Fine, I'm sorry, he hissed. Are you really? Gauron wanted to know. I am, really. I won't make any more trouble for you. Good. Then let's shake and make up. With the knife held to his neck, Gauron reached out with his right hand. Still forced to the ground, Dunnigan tremblingly took it. Now, where might my leg have ended up? We can't do anything without the disc I hid in there. I brought it with me. It's in here. An olive-green bag was stowed beneath the chair Dunnigan had been sitting in. Gauron put on the uniform previously worn by the dead Private Lang, stole his submachine gun, and left the briefing room with Dunnigan. It was already late at night. The lights were dim, and there was no one to be seen. Dunnigan led him down the corridors to a stairway to the upper deck. The control room's up here, he said. It's where you'll find the captain. Excellent. As Gauron put his foot on the step, he heard a voice behind him. Where do you think you're going? They turned around and saw a man standing there, his pistol already drawn. It was an officer, a short Caucasian man who was leaning out from behind the corner with his gun pointed squarely at them. Oh, hey, Captain McAllen, let me explain. Shut up, Dunnigan, McAllen interrupted sharply. So this was the game, eh? Good thing the Major warned me about the chance of a traitor in our midst. But what I never thought it would... Well, no, they added a what. There doesn't need to be an extra what there. But what I never thought is that it would come from our own SRT. With a rueful smile, Dunnigan dropped his attempt at smooth talk. He let out a chuckle and a shrug without the slightest sign of shame. Never liked that little girl from the start, he confessed. Never, from the start. You can explain yourself later, Captain McAllen told him grimly. Both of you, drop your guns. The corners of Gauron's mouth curled upward. And if we refuse? You die. McAllen was keeping his left side carefully hidden behind the corner, and he was probably a first-rate marksman. He'd kill them both in a split second before they could even raise their guns. It was then that another member of the crew appeared from around the opposite corner. It was a Southeast Asian man in a combat uniform. That you, Nguyen? Captain McAllen asked cautiously. Captain, Nguyen asked, what's going on here? Just what it looks like. Dunnigan's betrayed us. Call Weber and the others, McAllen said, his gun steady. Nguyen took stock of everybody present, then drew a small pistol from his pocket, a 9mm with a silencer. With a silencer? What's wrong with you, Nguyen? Hurry up and... Sorry, Captain. Nguyen pointed the gun at McAllen and pulled the trigger. There were 3 swift shots. Each released a spray of fresh blood from his chest. Like a marionette with its strings cut, Captain McAllen collapsed onto the floor. He didn't even have time for a scream, a curse, or an insult. Nice shot, Gauron breathed. So, would this make you my other partner in crime? Nguyen nodded. Looks that way. I'm Nguyen Bienbo. Do I get a bonus for that? Gauron laughed with a wince. I'll see what we can negotiate. Counting on it, Gauron-san. Nguyen made an OK sign with his fingers. Just then there was a faint sound. The three men, with their finely honed senses, turned their eyes toward it at the same time. A girl was standing just beyond the fallen McAllen. She was dressed in a way that seemed out of place on a warship, a pale green parka and yellow shorts, and her long black hair swayed in the dim light. The girl looked down at the blood at her feet, then slowly raised her eyes to Gauron and the others. Her delicate features were clenched up with uncertainty, and her lips were trembling. She seemed to lack any idea of what was going on and any comprehension of the situation she'd walked into. She opened her mouth wordlessly, snapping out of her daze. But before she could before she could turn to run away, Nguyen leapt at her. Leaped, not leapt, leaped at her. There was no way that an ordinary girl, already shaken, could compete with the speed of a trained soldier. He wrapped an arm around her from behind and held a black combat knife to her chest. She let out a cry of distress. Scream if you like, dearie, but here's what it'll get you. Nguyen put his mouth close to her ear as he pressed the knife harder against her breast through her clothes. Lots of painful memories and a body no guy'll ever want. She just barely managed to stifle herself. That's the civilian the captain invited on board. Let's finish her off, Dunnigan said. But Gauron shook his head gravely. No. Why not? Various reasons. We just need to try to avoid killing her, Gauron told him. Emphasis on try. As Nguyen walked the girl up to them, he peered into her face. She was holding her breath, her eyes filled with tears. Yet she was mustering up all the courage she had to glare back at Gauron. Fortunately, that seemed to be the limit of her resistance. It's been a while, Kaname-chan, Gauron said pleasantly. How's everyone at school? It's like a horror movie, Kaname thought. Sosuke beat this guy, this terrorist in the mountains of North Korea. He's supposed to be dead. Yet he had survived, and now he was here on this submarine. Out of nowhere he'd appeared, in this place where someone like him should never be. What is going on here? She wondered. What? Kaname racked her brains, but of course there was no way she could figure it out on her own. The only thing she could tell for sure was that she was in trouble again, and that this time it was especially bad. They're probably even better than Sosuke. Something in her mind told her, vaguely and without basis. This man, Gauron his name was, and his two highly skilled henchmen weren't like the terrorists working with Takuma 2 months ago. The way they walked, the way they carried themselves, the quiet aura of death that wreathed them. These were men who reeked of violence, professionals who could kill a man as effortlessly as they took a breath. That much was clear, even to an amateur like Kaname. The group began to travel through the deserted passageways. The bald-headed giant led the way, followed by Gauron and Kaname, with the lean knife-wielder bringing up the rear. They climbed a stairway, passed through several doors, and came out into the heart of the Tuach de Danann, the control room. Tessa was sitting in the captain's chair in the control room, reviewing the battle record from Barrel Daub Island. There were only 9 crewmen on duty there with her. Nearly half the seats of the lecture hall-like space were empty. Even her executive officer, Mardukas, was currently absent. The crewman nearest to the door was the first one to notice the new arrivals. He was barely on his feet before Dunnigan socked him in the nose, sending him toppling over his seat. The sound of his cry and fall drew all eyes to the entrance at once. Tessa looked over a second later than the rest.
She started in shock at what she saw. Sergeant Dunnigan of the SRT, Chidori Kaname being dragged along by Corporal Nguyen, and Gauron with a submachine gun in hand. Tessa could feel all the hair on her body stand up. The sight of these four people together told her immediately what had happened, and who it was that had betrayed her. Most of her crew began to rise from their seats, preparing to fall on Gauron and his accomplices. Before they could begin, Tessa shouted, "No!" The crew froze. "Don't do it! That's an order!" They probably thought they could neutralize the intruders, even if a few of them died in the process. But Tessa knew too well what a member of the SRT could do. Sosuke, Mao, Kurtz, McAllen, Yang, all were good people, but they also possessed a nearly superhuman aptitude for killing, and Dunnigan and Nguyen were no exceptions. The two of them alone could probably kill everyone here with just their bare hands, and to make things worse, they were armed. Tessa's rule was for her crew not to carry weapons on board unless absolutely necessary. Firearms and blades were especially forbidden in the control room. She had actually broken that rule herself and smuggled in a small automatic pistol, but one gun wouldn't save them against these three. "There's the judgment I expect from a captain. Know when to avoid a fight," Gauron said languidly. Then he turned his gun to Tessa. "Did you hear that, everyone?" he went on. "No funny business now, and that includes sounding the alarm. Any attempt at resistance I see will bring terrible consequences for your pretty little captain. How terrible, you ask? Let's just say X-rated things. X-rated. Things you shouldn't show to minors. Understand?" The crew slowly returned to their seats, expressions grim. "Do your worst. You won't leave this vessel alive," Tessa said with a note of challenge. But Gauron's reaction was pure delight. "Oh, she's adorable! You know, I feel like I've done you two wrong somehow, tearing you from this wonderful work environment." He looked at Dunnigan and Nguyen, but they both smiled ruefully. "Yeah, like we care," Dunnigan said with a snort. "It's not like she'd let us do anything anyway," Nguyen agreed. "I see," Gauron said neutrally. By the way, you should go join her, Kana-chan. You're both going to be my precious hostages." Gauron yanked Kaname by the arm to stand her next to Tessa. "Kaname-san," Tessa whispered urgently, "were you hurt?" "I'm okay, but one of your soldiers, Kaname stammered, face paled. "She's probably trying to tell me that someone's dead," Tessa realized. "But who?" She felt a pang in her chest, but managed to drive it from her mind for the time being. "Now, let's move on to the main event," Gauron was saying. "Captain, put us on a northwest course. 300 should do it." "I will not," Tessa answered. "Oh, won't you?" Gauron pointed his submachine gun at the closest member of the crew. "No!" Kaname shouted. The crew member being targeted, OOD Goddard, who held the army rank of captain, gulped, but braced himself for what was coming. "Don't do it, Captain," the man said to Tessa, looking straight at her. Tessa said nothing. "I won't hold it against you," the OOD went on. "Neither will anyone else. Just please—" "Die, then," Gauron said. But just before he pulled the trigger— "Wait!" Tessa interrupted. She couldn't take it. She just couldn't. Gauron's finger paused. "Oh, is that a crack in resolve, I see?" The terrorist chuckled wickedly and nodded a few times, as if enjoying her capitulation. "Turn to port," she whispered weakly, after a desperately long pause. "Course 330. "Captain!" the OOD objected. "It's all right. A simple change of course won't do any harm. Didn't you hear me? Port, course 300.
Yep, no, it says course 330. It says, what does it say? Gauron says 300, she says 330, then she repeats herself and says 300. Okay, never mind. There's more misprints in this than I remember the first time I read through it on my own time. Definitely more misprints. Could have used another pass with the editor. I'm sorry. Um, I'm beginning to realize that maybe that's my calling. The OOD nodded weakly and repeated her order. I would not be a good editor. By the way, I would not be great at it. I would be horrible. Um, I would make people feel bad. The OOD nodded weakly and repeated her order. The pilots began to steer. The Dedanon, which had been heading almost due north, slowly began to veer westward. There's no harm done yet, Tessa told herself. If he asked to take them past a depth their hull could withstand, or to fire any of the weapons, or to tamper with the output of the palladium reactor, if he made any dangerous requests, in other words, that's when she'd turn him down, even if it meant he killed every person there. Her only choice was to buy time. Soon enough, if they hadn't already, the crew outside the control room would realize something was wrong, and then the tables would turn. The enemy probably only consisted of Gauron and Guin and Dunnigan. If Mardukas and McAllen put their heads together, they could work something out. Yet leaving Major Kalinin on the island had proved to be a crucial mistake. She'd be so much more confident if he were on board with them now. Let me guess. You're thinking you can work something out if you buy enough time? Gauron said. Tessa froze. I should probably let you know. That last little exchange was for my own personal amusement. I have a backup in place for your inevitable refusal. Gauron chuckled again and pulled out a floppy disk. Yes, they run on floppies. Remember, it's an alternate timeline. The USSR is still intact. Floppies are the height of data storage technology. He took a few minutes to examine the captain's chair display and its connected computer module. This was one of the few terminals directly connected to the mother AI, Dana, which oversaw all the functions of the vessel. It can't be. A shiver went up Tessa's spine as she considered the possibility. After checking the throttle, Gauron slipped in the disk he'd brought. I think I need to do this and this. What a confusing interface, he grumbled. Honestly. He used the trackball to move the cursor around the screen, and then hit a few keystrokes. There we go. He pressed enter, and a window appeared. The terminal was reading the disk's data right before their eyes. Preparing COC. Remaining time 000005. This was followed by another display. Warning. Execution of COC approval at Isterosa. Division input password or void commit. About 3 to 7 ellipses strapped together. Then, her personal screen went blank, as did the control room's front screen. No, no. Tessa eked out the words, her face pale. Kaname and the crew just watched her nervously. They had no idea what was happening. But everything became crystal clear when the screen recovered, and displayed the following message. Welcome, Captain Gauron. Orders, please. I will do anything you ask. Gauron let out a whistle and placed a hand on Tessa's shoulder. Well, would you look at that? Machines are fickle things, aren't they? Tessa was dumbstruck. COC was short for Change of Command. Usually, only Tessa could change who was registered as captain. But Gauron had done it, using only a single virus-loaded disk. Only a few people in the world knew the Dedanon's programming language, BAAAAAAAAAK. That's capital B-A, lowercase d-a. And she could think of only one capable of doing something like this. It was him, wasn't it? She breathed at last. Do you know him? Gauron chuckled. I do. He sends his regards, by the way. Although if things go smoothly here, you'll see him yourself soon enough. Suddenly it all fell into place for Tessa. This was his twisted way of saying hello. He was working with Gauron, and Gauron was going to take her and her submarine and hand them both over to him. Now, AI-kun, Gauron said languidly. Yes, Captain. The response was delivered in a female voice with just a hint of sensuality, the voice of the mother AI, Dana. The immediate reaction suggested that she had already been implanted with Gauron's voice print data. I think we should run a little evacuation drill, Gauron decided. Please sound the fire and reactor accident alarms. Get everyone into the main hangar. Aye, sir. A chilling siren began to blare through the boat. Oh, I see how it is, Echo. You turn up like right as I'm about to end. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Um, he's on both. He's on both. I see how it is. Thank you for tuning in, nonetheless, even though I'm wrapping it up here. You can go and listen to them from the top, though. At least on YouTube, you can. On Twitch, I don't think it lets you do that. Ever since they changed it so that you can't, you have to have X number of subscribers or whatever in order to even save recordings. Um, I don't know. That was not long after I started, actually. Like 5 years ago. I don't know even what the requirements are on Twitch now for allowing monetization or any of that jag. Yes, we're gonna block that. Not you, Echo, some other guy. Um, yeah, so that'll do it. Sorry for this week. No, not for this whole week. For this Monday, I have to call it, unfortunately. This Wednesday, though, we still have more Down Below Station to look forward to. We're near the halfway point. Just before the halfway point. Um, this week we'll be at it. Um, things are ratcheting up. And this Friday we'll be reading through more of Death's End by Shijin Liu, which we'll actually be getting started on the book in earnest, which will be nice. Yup. Yup. Be delving into the plot. The book again winds up being pretty fast paced, so it's going to wind up doing multi duty and swapping between plot lines pretty frequently. Um, after it gets into the swing of things. Um, so pacing is a step up from much of the first half to third to two-thirds um, of the Dark Forest. Anyway, yeah, I've got a. This one will be short. We will finish this third book of the Full Metal Panic series next week. We will finish it, come hell or high water, um, unless I get into a traffic accident and lose my larynx, in which case I won't. So there. Um, to be oddly specific. Anyway, yeah, that'll do it. I got a dip. Um, to anyone tuning in for the first time, I do these live every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, starting at about 12 noon U.S. East Coast time. Um, if you don't, or Eastern Standard Time, or UTC -6, depending on where you're from, give or take an hour. Because it occurs to me that some places don't do daylight savings, and therefore it shifts everything off by an hour. Um, on one side of the year. Uh, if you just want to watch them after the fact, feel free. They're all uploaded on the YouTube. I generally update the playlists every month. So that'll be coming up this week, and I will get them updated. And yeah, otherwise, have a good one. Stay safe, stay sane, and be decent to each other. I will see you all next time. Toodaloo. I got a dip.